Okay, next up is Twilight of Midgard, a LitRPG fantasy series written by Clark Green. It's 177 pages, $2.99, available on Kindle Limited. And here's the novel description. Somewhere between the glitch logout and eligible devnote and missing teammates, Roland decided he needed a map. In the height of Twilight II, the team was a 5-man avalanche of brutal force, a squad of peerless gankers and griefers. They were the greatest villains of the 9 realms. This is the story of the sequel. Twilight of Midgard IV is dropped, and Roland and his team are about to hit the first level cap. This team of veterans and friends will face the greatest challenge yet, wrestling their useless early game builds into something functional, while guiding a noob down the path of min-maxing and violence. But when the squad receives a mysterious note, they learn that not everything in Twilight IV is as it seems. Okay, that novel description is kind of confusing and pointless because the story shifts very heavily from that. And that's kind of the same thing that happens with the story. I was super bored of this. And it's not like the writing is bad on a technical level. It's not. It's just that the style of the storytelling, especially in the early portion of it, was just... it didn't catch my attention. It very much felt like the gaming stuff was definitely fine. It was very accurate of like, oh, this is what it feels like to play MMO and choosing your stat builds and choosing your builds and min-maxing and the group combat. All you could tell the author had some experience with MMOs, but the writing style did not give me a depth of character, did not make me interested in these characters and shape or form. There was a little background of like connections between the different characters in this group. But it very much felt like I was watching someone play an MMO on YouTube instead of like following on actual stories. Like, oh, they're just going to go on these adventures and they're doing this quest and they brought a new person in. And they're trying to show them how to min-max, and there's a bunch of gamer jargon, and that's perfectly fine. But there really was, especially in the first like quarter of this, no real plot. It's just them doing adventures and fights and mob killing, right? And there's no real character or role development here. The banter is fine. Like the actual relationship between the main characters and their dialogue, perfectly funny sometimes, very bantery. And the fights are decently fine. But as a story, it was more as like I kept lacking motivation to continue, and I had to force myself to continue on. And that's like... For sure, it's not a good quality. About 20% in the novel, the plot line actually does shift. There actually becomes a plot. Unfortunately, it's one that I've seen countless times, and it's not entertaining. Maybe it's because of my being jaded of like, it's essentially at the 20% mark, the MMO changes and it becomes a trapped in a game permanent story. Essentially, if you've read Sword Art Online, or if you see the anime, if you read the manga, whatever the case is, that's what it is. It's that exact same premise of like, suddenly we're all mysteriously trapped in the game, and if we die, we all die permanently. For some reason, there are gankers and people who PvP who don't believe it, and they believe it and they want to murder people anyway permanently. And it didn't make sense. There is no good setup for it. There is no like necessarily good real world like connection to it. It was super predictable along those lines, and it's just, there isn't even really a resolution to that conflict by the end of the story. It's just like, oh, kind of other groups are to be continued. And so maybe it's just me having read too many stories of that exact same story on premise, but I wasn't entertained with this one. And so for me, it's just boring. So it gets a score of 5 out of 10. Twilight of the Midgard, a LitRPG fantasy series with a score of 5 out of 10. I was so bored.